Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18. We are 3/4 of the through completed with the Gospel of Luke, the longest Gospel by far of any of the four Gospels, and we should finish up with the majority of it, and then just a few more sermons later on in the year. Today's title is A Case of Misplaced Confidence. It's a case of misplaced confidence. Luke chapter 18, we're going to begin reading in Luke 18:9 through 14, and then come back and finish in 1 through 8. Should be around page 931 in your pew Bibles. When you make it to Luke chapter 18, would you please stand for the initial reading of the Scriptures. He also told this parable to those who trusted in themselves that were righteous and looked down upon everyone else. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a publican or a tax collector. The Pharisee was standing and praying like this about himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. Greedy, unrighteous adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of everything I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest, saying, God, have mercy on a sinner like me. I tell you, this one went down to his house justified rather than the other. Because everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. Let us pray. God, we are thankful for your word, thankful for your truth, thankful that little old us, who in the grand scheme of 7 billion people is known by you. And that we have been given the opportunity to know you through the gospel, through the word, through the scriptures you have left us, which testify, Lord, to your goodness, to your faithfulness, to your work, to your sacrifice. God, I pray that we will be a people who have placed our confidence in you. There are so many things vying for our attention, vying for our attachment, vying for our concern, Lord. But I pray that today you will erase those things and wipe them away so that we will focus upon you. Who are we that the God of all the earth, who are we that the God of the universe use your word through your servant. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Confidence is a common topic in our hyper-individualistic society. If you follow sports very much, you will hear this phrase regularly. He's riding his confidence, or his confidence is at a high level. It's when an athlete performs at a high level. It's like when Stephen Curry can't miss, or Drew Brees can't throw an incomplete pass. The commentators will say he's performing at a high level. He's got a high confidence. A salesman who is breaking sales goals will be said to be performing with a high confidence or riding their confidence because they can't seem to lose or miss a sale. They're doing well. Confidence is related to boldness, but not as harsh as arrogance. You see, too much confidence is not good, and neither is too little. I remember once, at least once, working at Chrysler where I had a rough week or couple of weeks, and my confidence level waned. It seemed like every car that I fixed came back. Everything was a recheck, is what they call it. When you fix a car and it comes back. My FFV, fixed first visit score, plummeted. And it seems like no matter what I did, I was having to pull a transmission out again. See, I can testify to the absence of confidence, and I can also testify to the presence of confidence. There's been weeks where I could just, well, it's not this way, but it seemed this way, that I could just throw my rag on the car and it would be fixed. Kind of like, in the book of Acts, where everybody's touching the cloth that Paul anointed. It's kind of like that for the car. I'll just lay my rag on it and be fixed. Without becoming overly focused on self-concept, I want to establish a precipice for today's sermon. And the precipice is that confidence is found in a person and can extend from a person. We find confidence in ourselves, and we have a case of confidence being misplaced in today's text. You know, we all place our confidence in something. If you've ever had a car that you couldn't place your confidence in, you know how important having a car that you can place your confidence in is. For example, if you have that car, you tell your friend, we might want to take your car because I'm not sure my car can make it. You don't have a lot of confidence in your car. Now, we have confidence in people. Probably not as much as we would like to have, and as many people as we would like to have, but we still do have confidence in some people at some times, a lot of people a lot of time. And throughout life, we often learn the hard way that we have to guard how much trust and confidence we put in others. Because our error usually costs us. So let's call today's story, Two Men Go to Prayer Meeting. Turnout for prayer meeting on this day was low. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was a vying sports competition, maybe it was a busy schedule. The text really doesn't tell us. Jesus only talks about there being two men who went to prayer meeting. First man was confident. He was confident in several things. He was confident that he was better than the other man was there. As a matter of fact, he was so confident he even bragged about being better than this. And he says, "Thank God I am not greedy, adulterer, unrighteous, or even like this tax collector." He was so confident in his characteristic excellence that he felt like it was sufficient and necessary to let God know how good of a person he was. And he, personal choice, the text says he stood afar from this other man, for maybe it was germs or maybe the other man smelled, but it was most likely the idea of being associated with a person of this class and caliber and status. How unsanitary and unsanctified this tax collector would be. See, we see the synonym of confidence here, which is arrogance. Seen to be boasting about his holiness. Meanwhile, a second man arrives. Now, the second man, he's in a little bit different state than the first man. The second man is not quite as comfortable with his own self-assessment. He doesn't have a lot to boast about. He doesn't feel that his conduct is worthy of being boastful. His actions were not worthy of abundant discussion. Only his status is worthy of continuous repetition. For the scriptures say, he would not raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest, saying, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. In my life, I've been to a lot of prayer meetings. And I've come to the conclusion that if we ever attended prayer meeting the way the second man attended prayer meeting and the way the first man attended prayer meeting, we would end up with a lot more spiritual activity. See, this publican, this Pharisee, he placed his confidence in his outward conformity to standards or rituals or traditions. He placed his confidence in his outward conformity to standards. He's the type of guy that never misses a church service. Now, I'm not saying you should miss a church service. I'm just saying this guy never missed a church service. Why did he never miss a church service? Because his ability to stand before God depended on him showing up and being there so that everyone else could see what he was doing for God. And he's the type of guy that really doesn't like people who are not like him. You ever been to those prayer meetings where certain people sit over here and certain people sit over there and these people don't talk to these people? You know, we kind of have that a lot in the Christian life. We've created these sects, SECT, through denominations, through class, through society, and certain groups like to lob towards other groups. If you don't believe me, just watch Twitter. If you don't believe me, just watch Facebook. If you don't believe me, just read certain articles or periodicals put out by certain groups or denominations. And we like to lob towards one another. So we stand by ourselves because we don't want to be contaminated by those who have the wrong theology or believe something different than we believe, or for God's sakes, look different than we look. He says, God, I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of everything I get. That sounds like good spiritual disciplines. I mean, if everyone in here was fasting twice a week, including myself, and giving 1/10 of everything I get, including myself, if everyone here was doing that, I would say yes, yes, yes. I mean, these are the things we teach in spiritual disciplines class that we need to do. You need to give sacrificially. You need to be a steward of the money God's given you. You need to fast. But the issue is that he's using it for his own glory, not to honor God. You see, fasting in their world is a process of self-humiliation so that other people will notice and offer their assistance. It's a symbol of false humility for this guy. And I want to go to Matthew chapter 6 to kind of point this out. Matthew chapter 6, 7, this is Jesus talking. This is Sermon on the Mount. When you fast, don't be sad-faced like the hypocrites. So they make their faces unattractive so that their fasting is obvious to people. I'm assure you, they've got their reward. There you see it. You see the idea of fasting externally. Jesus is condemning the activity, fasting externally, so that others will see them and have pity on them and say, oh, look how holy they are. He says, but when you fast, you put oil on your head and wash your face. Don't you let anyone know what's good. You wash your face, you fix your hair, you do what needs to be done. He says, so that you do not show your fasting to people, but to God. He says, you don't look to people for assistance, you look to God for assistance. So that's the idea of fasting. It's the idea of self-humiliation. This Pharisee was using it so that other people would see his holiness. He says, and your Father who is in secret will reward you. And then he says, I give tithes to those, the priests, the Levites, and those who've lost their land. The interesting thing about this is he was in a class of people who were responsible for those who kept those who lost their land oppressed. You see, our righteousness is like a placard to be displayed. Our holiness is not something that we earn, and justification is not determined by our behavior. Our situation is exacerbated because our country is filled with people who are like this Pharisee, who are convinced that they are in a good standing with God because they've never killed anyone. Our state is filled with people who are convinced they are in a good state of God with God because they've never committed adultery. Our parish is filled with people who are convinced they're in a good state of God with God because they honor their father and mother. And our churches are filled with people who are convinced they're in a good state with God because they have no other gods before them. However, they do not know the one true God, therefore everything else is before the one true God. You see, our ministry and our mission as Little Life Community Church will carry us into the highways and hedges with people who are just like this. It's the ritualist who thinks he's okay with God through actions. The Pharisees often get labeled as legalists. Well, they're not really legalists as much as they are ritualists. And if you have a Catholic background, you can understand what I'm talking about. It's about participating in the rituals. It's about earning the favor. It's about conduct to justify or to reconcile the relationship, rather than the one who is the great justifier and the great reconciler coming down to you to restore the relationship. It's backwards. It's me working my way up into the one who is up and understanding and trusting the one who has come down. I vividly remember using the excuse that other people were worse than me, and that I had never killed anyone, so God would probably let me in. My false humility was an affront to God's demands for justice and holiness. See, then you have the almost justified tax collector. He's not really in the text. I'm creating a caricature to kind of describe him. He's the one who knows it's okay. He knows it's not okay what he's doing. But he refuses to turn to God to address his condition. You know what the most astonishing effects or aspects of humanity is? We hear the gospel. We know its benefits. But we carry on our lives as if it has no personal value. We go on about the business of living. Even though we claim to understand the message. The almost justified tax collector is the person in verse 13 who says, "But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven." And then there is no, but kept striking his chest, saying, "God, have mercy on me." The person that shows up but never commits. It's a person that knows the message of the gospel. He knows the truth. He knows the value of it. He knows his status. He knows his condition. But he never says, "God, I am going to turn to you so that you may reconcile my relationship with you. God, I know the things I do aren't right. I know that pornography is destructive. I know that my other sins are destructive. God, I know that my financial lack of stewardship is bad. God, I know that everything I've done up to this point cannot be acceptable to you." But he never goes on with the next statement. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. He stops. The tragedy is that many of these people understand the message of the gospel, yet refuse its benefits. And these also are the kind of people we're going to run into in this area as we do ministry. Strongly independent, morally and ethically grounded. They have a morality that is, shall I say, connected to the Scriptures, but is not rooted in the Scriptures. They know right from wrong, but they don't always value good and bad. We're called to minister to them and pray for our encounters with them. So we're going to run into the Pharisee, the person who has it all right. God has accepted me based upon what I do for others. We're going to run into the tax collector, the almost tax collector, who knows what they are doing is not right, but they have never cried out to God in mercy. You see, but confidence has an antonym also. Not only does it have a synonym, it has an antonym. The antonym is humility. This is the second man at prayer meeting. See, the second man is a tax collector. He's a debt collector. And debt collectors in the Roman world would often be independent contractors. They would give their money, give the Romans their tax money up front, and then come back later and get it out of everybody in the area. So, kind of like the sheriff of Nottingham, if you've ever watched the old Robin Hood cartoon. When he comes through and you have the cripple-legged dog, and he takes the dog and gets his last 2 cents out of the dog. Y'all might not remember that as a little kid. So, tax collector. He's got a set amount he's got to make. And once he gets above that set amount, guess what? Everything else is profit. So everything else that gets above that is profit. So his job is to make his money back and make a little profit on the side. And that's why tax collectors don't have a good reputation in the world, because if you have that kind of reign, power, authority in the ancient world, you have the authority to make a lot of money real quick. And your fellow people begin to look negatively upon you because they feel abused by you. Well, he realizes one thing, that also he is a debt collector, that God is the collector of debts. God has taken notice of everything you have said, everything I have said, and he is well aware of this. Perhaps this very thing is what drives this tax collector to prayer meeting this day. He shows up and he's reminded that humanity has the propensity for charge for amounts which they can't afford. Our debits often outweigh our credits, both financially and theologically. Even if we have any credits theologically, see, our liabilities often or always outweigh our assets. The divine debt collector cannot be ignored, nor can he be escaped. There's no way you can run from God. There's nowhere you can go and hide from God. And he realizes this. So he just stands back. Scriptures say he would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. God, extend your beneficence to me so that I may be right with you. And he says, I cannot keep your demands. That's what a sinner is. A sinner in their world is a Jew who did not keep the Torah, the Old Testament law, or you were a Gentile. That's their idea of sinners. You missed the mark. In other words, you were not as holy as God required it to be. He says, God, I cannot meet your demands. I cannot meet your mark. So we have the Pharisee, who truly has no need to submit to God because in his mind he is already good with God. That's a dangerous theology to have. And I'm afraid it's pervasive in our hyper-individualistic society that we do not need to submit to God. Everyone's already good with God. Me and God, we had this thing worked out. You ever heard that before? Me and God, we got this thing worked out. No. God's got this thing worked out with the world. You either participate or you don't participate. God's not into private contracts. He's not an independent contractor. He's not going to send you a spiritual 1099 with a zero balance saying you don't owe anything at the end of the year. He's in the group contract, and he made a contract with the world. And the scriptures say in Colossians 2:14 that our debt has been erased because God chose to send us the contract that says paid in full based on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It says in Colossians that he erased the certificate of debt. This is where I need a whiteboard. I need a lot of zeros. I can just wipe it away. Is anyone that's ever erased a debt for you? If they have, you know the joy. If they haven't, you know the difficulty. Chase is not going to tell me, you know what? You've paid enough on your house already. Got it. And the issue is that I can't even pay enough. That's the problem. That the debt is so huge that if I saw really the astronomical number that our offenses are to God and of His holiness, because, be honest, our sin is always worse than what we think it is. The Scripture said He has taken it out of the way by nailing it to the cross. And that's the danger of the Pharisee who says, God, look what I've done. Now, I'm not saying you don't do things for God once you submit to God. That's not what I'm saying. As a matter of fact, it would be good if we in Christ fasted twice, 2 days a week. And it would be good if we gave 10% of everything we had. But it's not good for us to stand off to the side and say, thank God I'm not like Him. Whew, life could be worse. And then you have this tax collector. Not the most noble in the community. Not the most honored in the community. Hated by many, loyal to few. Shows up to prayer meeting. You ever just showed up to church and not really know what's going on? It's all like this. Scriptures say he wouldn't even stand close. You ever went somewhere and you know you're not probably, you feel uncomfortable? This reminds me of those people who say, if I ever go to church, the roof's going to catch on fire. It's going to burn down. If that's going to happen, it happened to the tax collector. Okay, it's not going to happen. We say that as an excuse to not come to church, but I kind of giggle when that because if people knew who I was, I'd be notorious for burning up churches. Church is not going to burn down when you walk in it. Amen. His tax collector, he did not allow his self-assessment to keep him from going to the one place he needed to go. And we'll talk about another tax collector in the next chapter, which I think harks back to this and looks back to this. And as Jesus continues the narrative of those who seem not acceptable, the ones that are acceptable before God, and those who seem to be entrusted with the message of the glory of God, and the ones who squandered that message, and that being those who are the leaders of Second Temple Judaism, and those who end up condemning Jesus, the very one who is the Messiah from God. You see, we can bring a lot of things before God. We can bring a lot of things to God. And we can come before God and we can tell God we're all right when we're not all right. We can convince ourselves of a lot of things. We can have confidence in a lot of things. But there's one thing we must have confidence in, and that's God's character alone can save us. And over our ministries over the next few months, we're going to encounter people, and as we begin to talk to them about the message of the gospel, we're going to hear some responses upon this spectrum. Yeah, I know my life's not right, and I'll get around to it. Oh, I'm good with God. I'm good with God. We're good. We got to get this thing worked out, you know. I know I need to come to church. Both of these people went to church. They both showed up to prayer meeting. One of them was righteous and the other one was unrighteous. The Bible says one of them went home justified and the other one went home unjustified. The one difference is that one of them cried out to God and said, have mercy on me. And the other one says, look at my placard of righteousness. Oh, holy thou art. And Jesus says, one will be humble and the other one will be exalted. And you know why you can put your trust in God alone? Let's go back and look at the lady in 18, 1 through 7. Now he told them a parable on the need for them to pray and always not give up. He said there was a certain judge in a certain town who did not fear God nor respect people. That's a dangerous combination. He doesn't fear God. He doesn't care about people. He does what he wants to, when he wants to, how he wants to, where he wants to. He's shameless. He has no honor. He has no ethics. He has no integrity. But he's a judge. And no, it's not St. James Parish. And a widow in that town kept coming to him and says, give me justice from my adversary. So you have this widow who is the most pitied, obscure, irrelevant, unnecessary part of their society. Why? Because her husband's died. She's lost her honor. So because there's no man to take care of her. No one, because if there was a man to take care of her, her son would be the one doing the bargaining here. So she is on her own. No Social Security, no job, nothing. Someone's taking advantage of her. She says, give me justice for my adversary. Do you think there is any chance you will ever get justice from this judge? No. He doesn't fear God, nor does he care about men. That's what the text says, verse 4. For a while he was unwilling, but later he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or respect people, yet this widow keeps pestering me. I will give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. Do you know what the language in the Greek is for this? She, wear me out, is Greek for black eye. Literally, the Greek says, so she doesn't give me a black eye. Now, I've been worn out before and walked away with a black eye in a fist fight, but that's exactly what this. This lady is wearing me out with her pestering me. I guess she's the original black widow, right? So she keeps coming to this judge, keeps coming to this judge, and he says, I cannot take any more of it. It's a metaphor for someone who's taking a beating. So this judge, even though he says, I don't care about God, I couldn't care less about God. And he said, and this lady, I couldn't care less about this lady, but she is going to drive me up the wall. I'm going to give her what she needs. I'm going to give her what she wants. And then verse 6 says, listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his elect who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay in helping them? I tell you that he will swiftly grant them justice. Nevertheless, the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? See, Jesus makes a comparison here. If the most obscure person on earth can go to the most godless judge on earth, how much more do the righteous have access and confidence in God, the true judge, and have access to his justice instantaneously? It's an argument from lesser to greater. He says if a pagan judge will give this lady justice, how much more will the God in heaven who came down on earth to dwell with you, to become like you, to rescue you, to experience life as he has created it, to walk yet never sin? How much more would that God give you justice to those who cry out? Now that you can put your confidence in. The widow's activity is a question of persistence. The question for us is, will we persistently live like the Pharisee, or will we persistently live like the tax collector? When's the last time you came before God and got serious with God? Not telling him about your merit. He knows that. He doesn't need to hear your merits. He might need to remind you of your merits, but he doesn't need to hear your merits audibly. See, this position of this tax collector is a position of humility. It's an act of saying, God, I know, I am convinced that I am unworthy before you. And I am unworthy. But because of your cleansing mercy, because of your atoning sacrifice, I can go to my house justified. It's hard for us to do that. And I'm afraid it's because we have a case of misplaced confidence. We don't like for God to see our vulnerability. We do not like for God to see us naked and ashamed. And that's the problem of post-sin in the garden. Adam and Eve realized they were naked and they were ashamed. They were ashamed because they wanted to cover themselves up. You know, there's a season in life, if you have children, you know this, where it's weird, I don't understand it. It's like it's something to be celebrated, to take all your clothes off and run around the house naked. It's one of the strangest things I've ever seen. It really is. I got one going through it right now. I'm like, can you please stop doing that? Stop! Stop! It's innocence. It's innocence. She doesn't have any shame. She's fine. She don't care. If I could open the door, she'd go outside. You know, that's exactly what it was like before the fall of God. And that's exactly the intent of salvation, is to restore that relationship with God. So that you can come before Him and say, God, I am